My wife looked me in the eye and said, "Be grateful. I'll keep my boyfriend. You'll keep paying the bills." That was the night I stopped being her quiet provider and opened a folder on my laptop labeled Truth. I'm David Miller, 38, a cybersecurity consultant in Dallas. People think silence means weakness. Where I'm from, silence is how you load the last piece before you flip the switch. In the next 60 seconds, you'll see why. The red flags were small: late nights, a phone face down, cologne that wasn't mine. But the message I found wasn't small at all. It said I was predictable, an ATM with a pulse. So I invited the man to dinner. He brought a $1,000 bottle and a smirk. I brought a USB. If you've ever been told to be grateful while someone spends your money and laughs at your faith, stay. Because tonight, the quiet man speaks, and the room goes silent. Watch what happens next. Name's David Miller. I'm 38, a cybersecurity consultant in Dallas, Texas. On paper, my life reads steady. Mortgage mostly paid, a pickup that starts every morning, a dog that knows when the game's on. I grew up where handshakes still mean something and neighbors wave even when they barely know you. I'm the guy folks call when their Wi-Fi dies or when a strange email makes them nervous. I like quiet mornings, black coffee, and work that rewards patience more than noise. For 12 years, I believed marriage worked the same way. Show up, do the unglamorous parts, and let consistency do the talking. Jessica used to say my calm steadied her. I took that as a promise, not a warning. Looking back, I can see the mistake. Calm without curiosity turns into routine, and routine, if you're not careful, turns into a story someone else writes for you. The night I realized that, the author changed. It was me. At last. From the sidewalk, our house looked like a postcard. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, a flag that never touched the ground. On Saturdays, I mowed, waved to the mail carrier, and swapped small talk about weather and football. The Millers, people said, had it figured out. 2 incomes, a sensible SUV for her, my old Chevy for me, and a backyard big enough for Thanksgiving cornhole. We hosted cookouts where Jessica floated room to room like a sparkler, bright and effortless, while I kept the grill steady and the music low. Older neighbors told me they wished their sons would settle like I had. At church, the usher squeezed my shoulder and called me rock solid. Stability is flattering until it hardens. You don't notice the weight because everyone else keeps praising the shape. From the street, no one sees the cracks in a foundation. They see paint and lawn stripes. By the time someone hears the house groan, it's shifting. Jessica didn't enter a room. She changed its temperature. She had that Texas polish, heels that clicked like punctuation, a laugh that made people turn, and a way of remembering names that felt like a gift. Early on, she'd lean into me at parties and whisper, "You're my calm in the chaos," and I'd feel 10 feet tall. We were a good contrast, her sparkle, my ballast. She taught me to take more pictures. I taught her to check the locks twice. Our wedding album smells like cedar from the hope chest where we keep it. There's a photo of us outside a tiny hill country chapel, wind in her hair, my tie crooked, both of us convinced we were outrunning time. The truth is, time doesn't chase. It waits and weighs. The first night she came home glowing from late meetings, I told myself it was ambition. Fire gives light. It also burns. I didn't notice the smoke until it stung. 12 years is long enough to build a rhythm and short enough to forget the melody. Our first decade was a scrapbook of ordinary wins, paying off a credit card, fixing a leaky sink together, learning each other's coffee orders without asking. We held hands in the produce aisle, argued about paint colors, and made up before bed because that's what we promised. Somewhere after year 10, the glue turned invisible. We stopped leaving notes on the counter. Date nights moved to the someday column. I started taking more late calls. She started taking more late classes. No one ever says, "Today is the day our marriage drifts," the way no one ever says, "The tide just stole my footing." You notice it when you're already knee-deep, unsure how you got there. The jokes landed softer. The kisses got quick. One night I reached for her hand during a movie. She didn't pull away. She just didn't notice. That's worse. It wasn't a fight that warned me. It was the quiet changing shape. There's a silence married people know, the kind after a long day when words are optional and presence says enough. Ours shifted. It grew rehearsed, like we were both reading stage directions no one wanted to admit were taped under the table. Dinners went from stories to summaries. How was your day? Fine. Yours? Busy. Forks, clinks, phones. I started hearing her breathing from the next room louder than I heard her voice beside me. The TV filled the spaces where jokes used to land. I'd pause a game to show her a funny play. She'd smile without seeing it. Some nights our house sounded like a library after hours. Lights on, nobody talking, something unshelved. Men my age will understand. You think it's a season, you tell yourself it'll pass. But seasons move in circles. This felt like a straight line, and straight lines lead somewhere, usually down. Then came the little edits to our routine. Her phone started living face down, always silent, like it needed privacy from the room. She took on back-to-back projects, something she'd never brought home before. Calendar invites popped up with titles that said everything and nothing. Client review, touch base, urgent follow-up. She began loving the gym at odd hours, coming back fresh and bright, like the day had finally noticed her. I tried not to keep score. Any man who's kept a marriage alive knows you pick your battles and respect space. Still, patterns talk. One night, a buzz lit up her screen while she cooked. She moved faster than the oil in the pan, sweeping it, laughing, "Spam!" I nodded, but the word stuck in my teeth. Spam doesn't make you smile. Spam doesn't need a passcode. The first time I asked a second question, she looked at me like I'd knocked on a bathroom door. That look crossed a line. The perfume moment came on a Tuesday, the kind that starts ordinary and ends with something you can't wash off. Jessica swung through the door in new leggings, cheeks flushed, hair up, and a glow that didn't match the hour. I hugged her like I always did, a habit as old as our first apartment. The scent hit me, clean, masculine, expensive. Not the citrus she wears, not my aftershave, something cooler, like rain on stone. She stepped back, opened the fridge, and started humming an old pop song. My brain did what brains do when it wants to protect the heart. It explained. Maybe a trainer, maybe a new soap in the locker room, maybe I'm imagining things. But the next day, it was there again, fainter, hanging in the car like a thought you can't shake. You can ignore a sound. A smell is harder. It creeps under doors. That night I labeled a folder on my desktop, Truth. 9 came on a warm Thursday in Houston. A client dinner ran long and I cut through downtown toward the garage. On a rooftop bar, string lights hung like low stars. That's when I saw her, Jessica, leaning across a high table, laughing in a way I hadn't heard at home in months. Next to her stood a man my age, squared shoulders, navy jacket, the posture of someone who expects doors to open. He touched her wrist like it was already his. She didn't move it. I watched 2 minutes that felt like 2 winters. Maybe it was business, I told myself. Then he brushed a napkin against her palm. She kept it. When the server poured wine, they didn't toast, they locked eyes. If you've ever seen your name erased from a picture, you know the feeling. Cold first, then ringing. I stepped back into the elevator, alone, carrying a silence that didn't belong to me anymore. Not mine, anymore. That night I didn't drive home. I found a quiet bar 2 blocks from the hotel, the kind with wood that remembers every ring left by a heavy glass. I ordered bourbon and let it sit, waiting to see if my hands would shake. They didn't. On the TV, highlights played from a game I'd usually care about. The sound was off. I took 1 sip, then another, and pictured Jessica pocketing that napkin like a promise. Denial is a loyal dog. It will follow you into traffic. I set the glass down and told the truth to myself out loud, just once, so I could hear it. She's with someone else. The bartender looked up, then looked away, like a man who's heard that sentence before. I paid cash, stepped into the night air, and felt something settle. If I wanted to keep my house, my future, my center, I had to open both eyes. No blinking. Not tonight. Morning came like it always does, with coffee, email, and the hum of a laptop that never asks questions. I put on the same calm voice my clients trust and spent 8 hours solving other people's problems. Meanwhile, a second job started taking shape. By day, I was David Miller, cybersecurity consultant, dependable, On time, the man with the plan. By night, I was something else entirely. A husband translating shadows. I learned roots, patterns, and the simple math of absence. If she said working late, I noted the clock. If she showed up glowing, I wrote down the hour and the story attached. Older men know this rhythm. You keep moving, pay the bills, and let your hands do the work while your head takes inventory. Each evening the ledger grew. I didn't pray for a miracle. I asked for clarity. When it arrived, it didn't shout. It stacked itself neatly, row after row, impossible to ignore. For long. One night after dishes, she stepped into the shower and left her laptop on the kitchen island, open to a shopping tab. The cursor blinked like a dare. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed either. I clicked the mail icon, no password prompt. The inbox opened like an unlocked glove box. There they were. Hotel confirmations, dinner reservations for two, calendar blocks named strategy at places no one holds meetings. Dates matched the nights she'd worked late. A confirmation email included a note, high floor, city view. Another carried a thanks for the celebration. I scrolled until my throat went dry. A man named Richard Hayes appeared in the threads, forwarded itineraries, private bookings, reminders I never saw on our shared calendar. If you've ever found a stranger's jacket hanging in your closet, you know the feeling. Heavy, wrong, undeniable. The shower shut off. I closed the lid, quietly, and set the plates to dry. The messages started like flirtation and soured into cruelty. I clicked a thread where my name was a punchline. He's predictable, Jessica wrote. Like a robot, pays the bills, asks the same boring questions. Richard replied with a joke about me folding laundry while they were together. I don't know why that line hurt more than the rest, but it did. It was the smallness of it, the way contempt chooses little knives. There were emojis, pictures of wine glasses, selfies angled to hide rings. One message from her said, "He'll buy anything if I say late meeting." Another, "He thinks stability is love." I read them twice to make sure I wasn't inventing tone. I wasn't. Older men will understand. We can handle the truth. It's the mockery that curdles the gut. I took screenshots until the folder looked full, then kept going. Somewhere past midnight, my heart stopped arguing. It let the evidence speak, and it spoke, clear and final. People ask if I cried. I didn't. Tears require hope, and hope had left the room before I opened the laptop. What came instead was a clean, hard cold, the kind you feel when you step outside in January and the air teaches you respect. My chest went tight, then steady. I could hear the water in the pipes, the neighbor's car door, the hum of the fridge, every ordinary thing suddenly clear. Grief can roar, mine organized. I closed the computer and stared at the dark window above the sink, my dim reflection looking back like a witness. Somewhere in that glass, the old version of me faded. Not the kindness, not the patience, those I planned to keep, but the passivity pretending to be peace. I walked to the bedroom and listened to Jessica breathe, slow and even. My heart matched the pace. Cold isn't empty. It's focus. And focus, for a man like me, is a promise. To keep. I've told clients for years, numbers don't lie, people do. The next morning, I logged into our credit card portal with the same calm I use at work. Dates, amounts, locations, clean columns marching like troops. A steakhouse in Midtown on a Tuesday, she was at yoga. A luxury lingerie boutique 3 towns over, receipt ID I'd never seen in our home. Spa charges stacked near holidays I spent installing her new light fixtures. Every line item felt like a breadcrumb leading away from us. I opened a spreadsheet and matched transaction times to her calendar entries. The overlap wasn't close. It was exact. If you've ever reconciled a bank statement after a storm, you know the mix of relief and dread. Part of you is grateful for clarity. Part of you knows clarity will cost you. I printed the list and slid it into a manila folder labeled Truth. Then I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon upright. Jessica misread me the way people misread quiet rooms. She assumed silence meant surrender, that courtesy meant blindness. For a while, I let her. She floated through the kitchen humming, kissed my cheek on schedule, told friends on speakerphone how crazy busy things were. She thought my questions were softballs. How was the class? Good. Late night? You know how it is. I do, I thought. I really do. Older men understand. Sometimes the best way to learn what someone thinks of you is to give them a little rope. They'll measure it themselves. Jessica believed I was too gentle to press, too invested to leave, too decent to fight. She forgot that decency is not defenseless. So I smiled, refilled her wine, and fixed the squeak in the pantry hinge. People show you who they are when they think the lights are low. She showed me enough. I wrote it down. Then I dimmed them further. For better viewing. I created a new folder on a hidden drive and named it Truth. All caps. Easy to find when nerves make fingers clumsy. Inside it, I built simple rooms. Messages, receipts, photos, audio, timeline. Nothing fancy. Just quiet order, the kind that beats panic in a sprint. Every night I added something. A screenshot with the date in the corner, a PDF of a reservation, a voice memo describing a conversation while it was still warm. I backed it up to 2 encrypted locations and printed a hard copy index for my gun safe. Older adults will recognize the comfort of paper. Sometimes you need to feel the plan in your hands. I wrote questions only facts could answer. Where did they go? Who paid? How often? What did she say after? Each answer walked into the folder and took a seat. If I ever had to speak to anyone official, I wouldn't be guessing. I'd be quoting. Calm, precise, all there. The stack grew with a rhythm of its own. Lingerie purchased in a neighborhood she never visits. Spa packages named for renewal and glow. Tasting menus with wine pairings that cost more than our first month's rent. Hotels that promised privacy in their marketing copy. Ride shares starting near our driveway and ending near a tower with a pool on the roof. Each line told a small story. Together they made a book that didn't include me. I watched totals climb over the same weekends I fixed the fence, cleaned the gutters, and grilled for her friends. It felt like standing in a hardware store with a cracked pipe and hearing someone sell you a fountain. Older men know the insult of paying for your own replacement. I kept the receipts in clear sleeves, 1 per event, the way a collector handles stamps. By the end of the month, the binder didn't close flat. Neither did my jaw. Not anymore. Dinner became theater. Jessica would set the table, light a candle, and ask about my day with the same tone a flight attendant uses for turbulence. I answered like a man who believes in landing. She'd reach across the salt, touch my wrist, and smile for the picture no one was taking. The phone stayed face down between us, like a 4th-place setting. She told stories about demanding clients and late reviews, and I nodded at the right beats, cataloging names, times, and adjectives. Older couples told me once that marriage is made at the table. Ours was being unmade there, with good plates and polite laughter. I cleared dishes and caught her reflection in the window, composed, radiant, practiced. I imagined her trying on that same face in a different dining room across town. The thought didn't break me. It steadied me. Every performance ends. The trick is knowing when to stop clapping and leave. Before curtains fall, finally. I made a decision older men will recognize. I would go quiet, not soft. There's a difference. Softness yields. Quiet waits. I stopped pressing for explanations she'd rehearsed. I stopped rescuing conversations that didn't want saving. I showed up, did the work, paid attention, and let time show me which way the river ran. In the evenings, I organized the folder, sharpened the timeline, and practiced one thing I'd somehow forgotten: breathing through the urge to speak. Words can blow a case before it's built. Silence lets it cure. At dinner, I asked neutral questions and counted beats between her answers. In bed, I faced the window and matched my inhale to the streetlight's hum. If she mistook this for surrender, that was part of the plan. When the day came to talk, I'd have more than feelings. I'd have facts, dates, and a voice that didn't shake. Quiet isn't hiding, it's aim. And mine was finally perfectly clear tonight. She didn't ease into it. She set a takeout bag on the counter, poured herself a glass of wine, and said, "We should be honest." Then, "I'm seeing someone." No tremble, no apology, just a headline read in a calm voice. I watched her lean against the island like it was an interview set. "He makes me feel alive in a way you never could." I heard the refrigerator hum louder than I heard my own breathing. Married people know this sound, the click in your chest when a story you believed in gets rewritten without you. I counted to 5 the way my dad taught me when I was a kid who wanted to swing first. "You're saying this why?" I asked. She met my eyes, steady as a metronome. "Because we're adults," she said. "Because it's simpler if we're clear." She took a sip, never breaking eye contact. "And because nothing has to change for you." She hadn't finished. Not yet. She laid out her plan like a budget. "No divorce. That's messy. You keep the house routine going, I keep my relationship. We don't have to pretend anymore." She spoke about our life the way you talk about utilities. Turn this on, turn that off, keep bills on autopay. "Richard will be around more," she added, as if she were warning me about a new delivery schedule. I waited for shame to enter the room. It didn't. "You'll still have what you want," she said, waving a hand toward the mortgage and the neat rows of our calendar. "Stability, predictability, you're good at those." Older men know this feeling, the one where your pride stands at the door, deciding if it should walk in or spare you. I pictured Thanksgiving on the patio, my chair empty while another man refilled her glass. "You're asking me to fund my replacement," I said. She smiled, small, patient. "I'm offering you peace." She slid her phone closer. "I've been told my whole life I'm steady. It's not magic, it's practice. You learn to breathe when the room begs you to shout." I watched the muscles in her jaw, the flicker in her eyes when she said his name. I could have made a scene. Men do it all the time and regret it before the echo dies. Instead, I did what I know. I managed the moment. "Okay," I said, like a man testing ice. "You've said your part. Go on." She blinked, surprised I hadn't cracked. Calm isn't agreement. It's a tool. I put both hands on the counter to keep them from balling into fists. "If you're confident about this plan," I said, "say the quiet part out loud." She did. Every sentence landed like a tack under a tire. I could feel air leaving the day, slow and certain. I nodded once. "Thank you for your honesty." She exhaled, a victory breath. That's when she pressed play. She tapped her screen and my voice filled the kitchen, clipped, spliced, arranged like a villain's monologue. "Where were you? Who were you with?" "You're lying." Out of context, it sounded like a threat, not a husband asking for daylight. I could hear the seams, but seams don't matter when a river of noise floods a room. "Imagine your colleagues hearing this," she said. "Imagine a judge." Somewhere in the file there was a night I'd found her car warm at midnight, another where her phone lit up at 2 a.m. with a name she said was spam. On the screen, those nights stacked like evidence of me, not of us. "I've documented everything," she said. "Your controlling behavior, your tone." Older adults know this truth. In a courtroom, context dies first. She watched me listening to myself, waiting for me to hear what she wanted me to be. I clicked the volume down. The kitchen fell quiet. I looked up. "Anything else?" She squared her shoulders like someone stepping to a podium. "If you make this difficult, I'll file. I'll win. I have recordings, texts, the whole narrative." She said narrative like a person who's practiced it in the mirror. "You'll lose the house, your retirement, your reputation." Reputation. That word is heavier at 40 than at 20. It travels with your business card and your church pew and your niece's graduation photos. I pictured my boss blinking through a headline, my mother-in-law repeating a version that made me sound like a storm she'd predicted. "So," she finished, "let's be adults." She thought fear would do the rest. Fear is obedient, until it isn't. I nodded as if her logic had found a home. Inside, something older than fear uncoiled. Dignity, maybe, or the part of a man that refuses to fund his own erasure. "All right," I said softly. "We're finished here." Her eyebrows lifted. "We're not," she said. But I was. Rage wants a sound. Doors, voices, glass, anything to tell the block what happened. I gave it nothing. I slid my wallet into my back pocket, lifted my jacket, and took my keys from the ceramic bowl Jessica bought on a girls' weekend. The house smelled like rosemary and heat from the oven. I opened the front door, felt the night pull at my shirt, and stepped out. Behind me, her heels ticked once against the tile. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Out," I said. Not a lie, not a map. The air was colder than the kitchen. Good. Cold keeps a man's thoughts clean. I pulled the door until the latch caught. No slam, just that small, honest click you hear when something closes the right way. In the driveway, my truck waited like a friend who doesn't ask questions. I climbed in, started the engine, and let the radio speak low enough to ignore. I didn't need directions. Not tonight. I drove with the windows cracked and the heater on, the way you do when you want to feel something and not freeze doing it. The city hummed, storefronts closing, traffic thinning, a few late horns arguing with nothing. I passed the stadium lights, the tire shops, the billboard promising forgiveness in 6 words. Talk radio murmured about a coaching change. I turned it down. Older men know this drive, the one where the road holds the anger until it cools into decision. I counted green lights like steady breaths. Somewhere on 635, the sky opened just enough to show a line of stars, thin as a scratch. I thought about the Thanksgiving we hosted, the one where my brother burned the rolls and we laughed until we cried. It felt like a movie from a different decade. I kept going until downtown shrank behind me and the suburbs opened their palms. When the roads got quiet enough, I made a turn. There's a ridge west of the city where the skyline looks like a row of lit match heads. I parked, cut the engine, and listened to the truck tick as it cooled. The wind had teeth. I stood with my hands in my pockets and let the lights steady me. Distance tells the truth. What looks towering up close turns small enough to hold in your eye. I named what had happened, each word a stake in the ground. Betrayal, contempt, leverage, fear. Then I named what would happen next. Patience, order, consequence, freedom. No more, I said, not loud, but final. I wasn't promising revenge. I was promising myself a life where I didn't apologize for protecting it. The man who accepted terms he didn't agree to, he could stay up here with the wind. I'd drive down different. I breathed in until the cold stung. Enough, I added, like a benediction. Then I turned back toward the truck, toward action. People will tell you I changed that night. I did, but not the way they mean. Kindness didn't die. Decency didn't die. The part that died was the version of me that mistook politeness for peace, silence for safety. I decided my calm would stop cushioning other people's choices. I would use it instead like a carpenter uses a level, to make sure what I'm building stands. Back in the driver's seat, I felt like a man who'd finally found the owner's manual for a house he built by instinct. Older adults will understand. Somewhere around 40, you stop auditioning for roles you already play. Husband, provider, man. You either honor them or you don't. I would, but on my terms. I watched my breath fog the windshield and clear again. We write the next chapter, I told my reflection. He nodded back. The quiet remained. It just stopped obeying. In the rear view, Dallas waited. So did my first move. At home, I went to my office and pulled a legal pad from the drawer. I wrote 3 columns. Pieces, board, clock. Pieces, Jessica, Richard, me. Board, house, finances, reputation, friends, work. Clock, what they think they control, what I actually do. Chess isn't about anger, it's about squares. Control enough of them and the king moves where you want, even if he thinks it's his idea. I opened the truth folder and reviewed my notes. Dates, receipts, names said casually over chicken and candles. I asked simple questions older men respect. What do I want to protect? What am I willing to give up? What must they never touch? Then I wrote 2 sentences at the top of the page. Don't warn, don't rush. People underestimate the man who doesn't talk. Good. Let them. Checkmate isn't a punch, it's a corner that appears too late to escape. I capped my pen, closed the folder, and chose my opening. Silence. Morning routines make good cover. I kept mine, coffee, emails, invoices. Between tasks, I logged every new piece the day offered. If Jessica said client breakfast, I noted the time she left, the shoes she chose, the perfume that lingered by the door. I photographed mileage on the dash before and after. I saved screenshots of calendar blocks with vague titles and copied addresses into a small notebook I carried like a receipt book. Older folks know the comfort of pen and paper. It slows your hands and sharpens your head. I wasn't hunting drama. I was building a timeline sturdy enough to lean on if the room started to sway. Each entry got a number, and each number got a brief sentence. Who, where, when, paid by whom. By lunch, patterns appeared like fence posts in fog. By dusk, the fog thinned. That night, I backed it all up twice, then breathed. Order beats panic. Patterns beat excuses. Always. I kept the text simple and lawful. Devices on our shared plan, accounts already signed in, no guesswork. I enabled backups she'd turned off and forwarded copies of messages to an inbox only I knew. I didn't break locks. I looked where the windows were already open. Notifications became breadcrumbs. A preview line here, a calendar nudge there, a cloud sync that quietly stamped the hour. I stored everything in truth under a folder named Messages. Each file date-stamped twice, system and handwritten, because one clock is a rumor, two are a witness. Older men understand redundancy. That's why we keep spare fuses and a second flashlight. The goal wasn't voyeurism, it was clarity, in case clarity was the only shield I'd get. That week, texts came steady as rain on a metal roof. Jokes, plans, sorry not sorries. I read just enough to confirm, then saved the rest before emotion could blur the lines. Feelings pass, backups don't. The folder grew. The first time I saw my name turned into a joke, I felt it in my stomach, not my chest. It wasn't the affair that winded me. It was the neat cruelty. He's harmless, she wrote. Predictable. Richard added a line about me ironing shirts like a hotel clerk. It's funny how contempt picks chores as weapons. Older men will know this sting. You spend years becoming dependable, then watch that word repackaged as dull. I didn't answer the screen. I let it talk. There were timestamps after holidays, pictures taken under restaurant bulbs I recognized, and little daggers disguised as emojis. I captured them all, labeled them, and shut the lid when my jaw started to lock. No dramatic music, no slammed drawers, just a grown man at a kitchen table choosing to keep his hands clean. When the house went quiet, I copied the folder to an external drive. Cruelty sounds loud. Evidence sits heavy. I prefer heavy. That night, I lay awake beside Jessica and listened to her breathing. Sleep makes everyone look younger. It also makes strangers look familiar. The moon threw a rectangle across the ceiling, and I counted its edges like a man measuring a room he might soon leave. I wanted to be angry at her face. I wasn't. I was chilled by the distance between the person dozing inches away and the one who typed those lines. Older adults understand this ache. The body you know, the story you don't. I turned on my side and watched the red blink of the router, steady as a metronome. I'd spent years protecting networks from intrusion. Somehow I'd missed the breach at my own table. I didn't touch her shoulder. I didn't touch my phone. I let the cold do its work, clearing haze until the next step appeared. There it was, simple as a streetlight. Stop asking for sorry. Start preparing for impact. By morning, I had a clearer target. Richard Hayes. Real estate, mid-40s. The kind of man whose smile shows up in charity magazines and closing photos. I started where any grown-up starts now. Public records, professional bios, the parts of the internet people forget are public. I found development deals that made sense, and a few that didn't. Lawsuits settled without admission. Partnerships that ended with polite statements and no handshakes. Country club newsletters with his name in the tournament bracket and on the donor wall. Older men see patterns in lists. It's a habit from hardware stores and tax seasons. Richard valued 3 things I could count: reputation, leverage, and more reputation. That's not a typo. Some men collect watches, others collect rooms where their name gets spoken with a nod. I printed what mattered, circled dates, and highlighted connections to venues Jessica suddenly loved. If I had to speak to him, I wanted his mirror behind me at talks. Digging deeper, I found edges he'd sanded smooth. A partner's affidavit hinted at funds moved between projects like shells at a street game. A subcontractor complained about invoices under review for months while a ribbon was already cut. None of it proved a crime. All of it proved a habit. Then came the local business journal blurbs. Short, careful paragraphs about disputes resolved and plans reimagined. You don't need to be a lawyer to read what isn't said. Older adults learn this reading medical bills and insurance letters. The truth hides in the adjectives. I mapped headlines against Jessica's late meetings. More overlap. I added a new page to Truth called Hayes Risk and listed what shakes a man like him. Bad press, aggrieved investors, screenshots that turn private swagger public. I wasn't threatening. I was preparing a mirror. If the day came, I wanted him to see himself the way he made sure others saw him. Clear and cornered at last. I spread everything across my office floor one Saturday. Printouts, notes, screenshots, receipts, then stepped back like a man checking studs before hanging a door. The mess wasn't a mess anymore. Strings connected dates to charges, names to places, claims to proofs. In carpentry, you learn that a frame carries the weight. Nails just hold the meeting points. My frame was simple. Motive, method, pattern. Jessica wanted thrill without risk. Richard wanted applause without consequence. The method was routine dressed as exception. The pattern was contempt funded by my paycheck. I built a one-page brief anyone could follow, the way you write instructions for a neighbor feeding your dog. Older men know, if you can't explain it plainly, you don't actually have it. When the page read clean, I slid it into the front of the binder like a cover and titled it, Executive Summary. A weapon doesn't need noise to matter. It needs aim and the patience to wait for the moment. Out in the open, I kept the old script. I asked about her day, loaded the dishwasher, and fixed the cabinet hinge that squeaked every time the pantry opened. I didn't roll my eyes when she said late review. I didn't audit the clock out loud. I nodded, smiled, and moved the laundry from washer to dryer like a man who has decided the small things will keep him human. If you've ever survived a storm by tending to chores, you'll understand. Routine steadies hands. Jessica read my silence as surrender and relaxed into it. She posted photos of sunsets and salads, wrote captions about gratitude, and tagged places I'd circled in my binder. I kept my reactions small and my notes tidy. In public, we looked like we always had. Her shine, my ballast. In private, I reviewed the plan twice a day. Compliance is underrated in chess. Sometimes the quiet pawn advances until the board forgets he's dangerous entirely. On Thursdays, I cooked her favorite salmon, the one with lemon and dill that fills the house with a calm we used to earn. She'd float through the kitchen in a dress, kiss my cheek, and compliment the plating like a judge on a show. I drove her dry cleaning without being asked and kept the car gassed and washed. Small courtesies make a home livable. They also make arrogance comfortable. She mistook my hospitality for defeat and began narrating our life like a winner's speech. "We've found our rhythm," she told a friend on speaker. "He understands me." I stirred the sauce and wrote down the time. Older adults will recognize the split screen. One hand serving, the other keeping score you never wanted to keep. That night I wiped counter until it shined and watched her post a photo of the meal with a caption about balance. I liked it from across the table. Then I filed the receipt. Trust, even the fake kind, requires consistency. I gave her the same calm goodnights, the same shoulder squeeze in passing, the same quick joke about traffic when she came home late. I left my phone face up and answered on speaker so she could hear nothing happening. I said yes to small favors. Pick up wine, sign for a package, text her a photo of the dog in a ridiculous sweater. People relax when the world matches their script. She relaxed. The more she trusted the stage, the more obvious her lines became. She stopped hiding receipts in other bags. She stopped inventing new titles for the same nights. Confidence makes sloppy footprints. Older adults have seen it on ladders and ledgers. The moment someone stops checking is the moment rung gives. I kept checking, and I added one more line to my plan. Invite Richard to dinner. If she believed I had surrendered, she'd insist I prove it. Perfect. Curtain up. Morning always tells the truth in small ways. I was wiping the counter when Jessica took a call on speaker, careless and bright. "He is easy to control," she said, and laughed like she had just found a shortcut on a map. Richard's voice bled through, muffled by wind and ego. "Told you," he said. "He is comfortable." She walked past me, tapping the rim of her glass, humming as if they were talking about a new lamp, not a husband. Older men will recognize that moment. Your body goes still while your mind walks out back to breathe. My eyes moved to the calendar on the fridge, to the neat boxes I kept up to date. to the life scheduled like a train. Control, I thought, is something people believe in until the tracks switch beneath them. She ended the call with a kiss to the air. I rinsed the sponge, set it down, and listened to something crack. Coffee is honest. It cools if you stall. I wrapped both hands around my mug and felt the heat push back, steady and real. Her words kept bouncing, easy to control, like a bad jingle you cannot shut off. I tightened my grip, just enough to quiet the noise. A thin line appeared from the handle toward the lip, a line that spread like a thought you wish you did not have. The crack made no sound, but I heard it anyway. Older men know that music, the quiet break that tells you the next move matters. I set the mug down and dried my hands. Anger wanted a parade. I gave it a checklist. Protect the house. Guard the job. Keep the name clean. Do not warn. Do not rush. I looked at the calendar again and drew a box around Friday. If they wanted proof I was tame, I would give them dinner. Then I would serve consequence. At breakfast, I set a plate in front of Jessica and let silence do the first lap. When she asked about my day, I said I had an idea that might make life simpler for both of us. The fork paused midway to her mouth. "Go on," she said. I kept my voice even, like I was suggesting a change in the trash pickup schedule. "Invite Richard to dinner," I said. "If this is the new shape of things, let's be civilized." The word hung there the way a nail hangs before the hammer falls. She searched my face for heat and found none. Older men know this tactic. Present calm, watch the mask. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, the way a driver checks mirrors before changing lanes. "You would be okay with that?" she asked. "I would be gracious," I said, and took a sip of coffee that tasted right. The invitation was spoken. Now the trap needed setting. Shock flickered first, then strategy. She set her fork down and tilted her head like a realtor appraising a room. "Really?" she said, stretching the word into a smile. "You'd be mature about this?" I met her yes with a steady yes of my own. She studied me, searching for the catch, and when she did not find it, she laughed, soft, pleased, almost proud. "I knew you were practical," she said, as if practicality were a compliment and not a boundary she intended to cross. She began to plan aloud, which is how confident people tell on themselves. "Friday works. He has a thing downtown, but he can come after. I'll handle the wine." She texted while she talked, thumbs moving quick, the way hers do when she is sure the room belongs to her. Older men will understand. Sometimes you let a person write their own script. It saves paper. She looked glowing. "This will be civilized." Perfect word. Preparation calms a man like me. I cleaned the grill grates until they shined, set the good plates, and ironed the napkins Jessica likes for photos. The menu was hers. Roasted salmon with lemon and dill, skillet green beans with almonds, red potatoes with butter and parsley. I bought the Bordeaux she always praises and a sparkling water for me. Then I set the room like a board. Richard's chair faced the hallway camera I keep for deliveries. A small recorder waited under the table, taped beneath the runner where no one reaches. Another sat in the study, ready if voices traveled. I checked batteries twice, then once more because habit is cheap insurance. Older adults know the comfort of lists. I worked mine top to bottom, steady as a metronome. By afternoon, the house looked like a postcard again. By evening, it felt like a stage. I lit one candle and watched the flames settle. The cue was ready. At 7 sharp, the bell rang. I opened the door to a man in a navy suit tailored to say he never sits on plastic chairs. Richard Hayes held a bottle with a label that whispered price before you read it. His smile was practiced, like a salesman at the close. He extended his hand the way men test fences. I gave him firm and brief. "David," I said. "Richard," he answered, eyes scanning the entry, the art, the shoes lined by the mat. He smelled like cedar and credit. Behind me, Jessica floated in on heels that announced her 3 steps early. "You found it," she sang, and took the bottle like it contained a crown. He watched her, then watched me watch her. Older men know that look. It measures your backbone. I stepped aside and motioned them in. "Hope you like salmon," I said. "It is her favorite." He smirked. "I like what she likes." "Good. Tonight." She moved faster than welcome. Before his coat found a hook, Jessica slid into his space and kissed him with a confidence built in other rooms. Not a peck, not a mistake, a choice. I stood 5 feet away and watched like a host who knows the show must go on. He placed his hand at her waist, fingers resting where a wedding band used to announce a boundary. She laughed into his shoulder and then remembered the room had walls. "Wine?" she asked, turning back toward me with the brightness hosts use to hide spills. "Please," he said, sure of his seat. Older men will recognize the sting and the lesson. When someone performs disrespect, they are telling you who they think you are. My job tonight was not to argue the role. It was to change the ending. I set 3 glasses on the counter, opened his bottle, and let the cork exit clean. Air met arrogance. Pairing. We took our seats like strangers who agree on nothing and still pass the salt. I placed Richard at the head, a small gift to his ego that cost me nothing and bought me time. Jessica sat to his right, facing the camera's eye. I took the far side, in reach of the kitchen and the study door. The salmon glistened, the green beans snapped clean, and the room smelled like night worth remembering. "To new beginnings," he said, lifting his glass. "To honesty," Jessica added, with a smile that did not touch me. I raised my water. "To endings," I said, and watched the word disappear into steam. Older men know dinner is a test. Can you keep your voice even while someone writes on your back with a dull pencil? I passed bread left, topped his wine, asked easy questions that made him talk fast. Words piled up like kindling. All I had to supply was a match. They grew comfortable, which is when people say the quiet part out loud. Richard bragged about a deal he rescued, which sounded like a rescue mainly for Richard. Jessica teased me about my sales skills. If he had to sell water in a desert, he would go thirsty, she joked, and touched Richard's arm like the punchline needed a landing pad. They laughed in duet. I smiled thin as a blade and topped their glasses again. "I am better at security than selling," I said, and let the sentence sit there. Older adults know how to survive a table like this. Keep your fork still, keep your tone level, and measure the breath before you answer. I asked about his investors, his timelines, his rescues. He loved all 3 questions. He gave me names and dates like confetti. Jessica watched him glow and mistook it for winning. I watched his guard drop. Both are useful. Only one is dangerous. I kept the smile small and the water glass full. The recorder under the table listened better than any of us. Every insult, every boast, every clink it caught and kept. I didn't need fireworks. I needed clarity on tape. Jessica leaned back, pleased with the harmony she thought she was conducting. Richard stretched, rolled his shoulders, and bragged about a client who would eat out of his hand. I let that line land where the microphone could hear it. Older men know timing is a tool. I held mine. I stood to pour more wine, generous, careful, making sure his bottle did the heavy lifting. I returned to my chair and slid a second USB into my pocket, a spare for later. The house hummed like it always does before a storm. "Dessert?" I asked, as if the night were softening. It was not. Plates moved, glasses emptied, and the room leaned toward the story left to tell. Dessert arrived simple on white plates. Berries, whipped cream, a slice of lemon pie Jessica loves. I cleared forks, reset napkins, and felt the room settle into that soft hum dinners get before they turn. While Richard admired his reflection in the spoon, I reached into my pocket, set a small black USB drive beside his glass, and turned it gently so the metal caught the light. Neither of them spoke. The house did. Fridge, vent, the smallest tick from the hallway camera. "What's that?" he asked finally. "A shortcut," I said. "To the truth." I didn't raise my voice. I slid the drive an inch closer, then folded my hands and waited. Older men know timing can be a blade. Press too soon and it slips. Jessica's smile thinned. Richard's eyebrows did the math. I nodded toward the study. "Plug it in anywhere," I said. "If you prefer dessert first, we can start with evidence." Silence bit down hard. "Tonight." I let the drive sit there like a fourth-place setting. "In here is everything," I said. Reservations, texts, photos, audio, a timeline that doesn't wobble. I kept my hands flat. palms quiet on the table. If either of you doubts me, pick any date. We'll play it together. Jessica went pale in the way makeup cannot help, color draining around confident lipstick. Richard didn't move. He watched my face for the tell people expect from the decent man. I gave him none. "Why bring this out now?" he said. "Because dessert pairs well with truth," I answered, then added, "and because I'm done funding stories where I'm the fool." Older adults know a sober voice carries farther than a shout. I spoke like I was reading a simple invoice. "You owe. Here's the total." He touched the USB with one finger, testing weight that doesn't show. "You're bluffing," Jessica whispered. I shook my head once. "I'm done pretending. Try me." Richard leaned back, the bottle label catching on his cuff as if it wanted a better view. "Suppose this has something," he said, casual the way a man whistles near a dark yard. "What exactly are you after?" I turned the question like a coin. "Curiosity already costs you," I said, "because every person who dislikes you loves a story with artifacts." His jaw clicked. I listed what the drive contained that concerned him, not me. Private photos from hotels that match corporate filings, reservations during investor roadshows, his own voice describing clients as slow and hungry. Jessica stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language that still hurt. Older men know the triangle of power: money, reputation, access. Take any corner and the shape collapses. "Your investors read," I said. "Your competitors read faster. Enemies memorize." He glanced toward the hallway, calculating witnesses. "You would spread this?" he asked. "If forced," I answered. "But you'll force nothing. Not tonight." His mask cracked. "You're insane," he said, pushing back from the table just enough to rattle the fork. "No," I answered, steady. "I'm prepared." The word carried the weight of sleepless weeks and careful copies. "There are backups," I said. 2 off-site, 1 printed index. If anything happens to me, a package mails itself. I tapped the table once, not for drama, for cadence. This isn't about revenge, it's about boundaries. Older adults understand that line. You draw it when someone keeps moving the fence. Richard tried a smirk and couldn't finish it. "So what?" he said. "You think you can extort me?" I shrugged. "I think I can offer choices." He glanced at Jessica, looking for heat that might burn me. She gave him none. Her color hadn't returned. "I don't need your money," I added. "I need my life back." The room listened. Somewhere the vent clicked off. Without the hum, every breathing sounded louder. In this house. I turned from him to her, because the story began at our table. "Jessica," I said, using the voice I save for instructions that must be followed exactly. "I'm not negotiating pain. I'm stating terms." She straightened like someone hearing a door lock. "First," I said to the room, "understand my leverage is not money, it's narrative. Richard values 3 things: credibility in public, confidence in private, and a calendar that never questions his whereabouts." I tapped the drive. "This scrambles all 3. Investors don't forgive patterns. Country clubs gossip better than tabloids." Richard opened his mouth. I raised a palm. "You'll want to listen." Older adults know this feels like insurance talk, boring until a storm hits your roof. I'm done being the roof. I looked back at Jessica. "Here's what happens next. You end this tonight. You don't contact him again. When people ask why our marriage ended, you take the blame. Not me. You say it plain. Second," I continued, "you leave with what you carried in. Clothes, keepsakes, your car, if the title's clean. The house stays here. The accounts stay here. Retirement stays untouched. You do not touch my business, my clients, or my name." I kept the tone calm, the way you read safety rules on a plane. "You want out without ruin. I want out without theft. These terms do both." Her mouth opened, then closed. "You can't." "I can," I said, "and I will, if you force it." I tapped the pocket where a second drive waited. "There are timers. If you start a war, the story moves without me." Older adults understand this protection. It's the letter you leave with the lawyer just in case. Jessica's eyes shone wet with anger, not grief. "You'd really do this?" I nodded once. I'm not burning you. I'm turning off the funding. The room tilted toward decision. She looked at him. He looked down. Richard set his glass down without finishing the sip. The gesture told the truth his mouth avoided. He studied the USB like a man deciding whether the red wire is really red. How many people have seen this? He asked, voice trimmed of swagger. Enough, I said. Not too many. He nodded, understanding leverage likes quiet rooms. Older adults know this calculus. Risk lives in duplication, safety lives in proof. He leaned back, eyes traveling the walls as if checking for exit maps. You won't get my money, he said softly. I'm not asking, I answered. I'm offering you the chance to keep yours. Jessica waited for him to ignite. He didn't. Silence filled the chair where his bravado had been sitting. He looked at my hands, my face, the pocket with the second drive, and then at the hallway where the camera blinked red. He cleared his throat. What do you want from me? He asked. Nothing, I said. Jessica's voice finally arrived, but without its usual edges. You're overreacting, she tried, then changed lanes mid-sentence. We can talk about fair. I let the words circle the table and fall. Fair was before the lies, I said. Tonight is clarity. She searched for indignation and found math instead. Her eyes moved from the USB to Richard's quiet to my steady water glass, full as ever. You would ruin me, she said, almost pleading, almost accusing. No, I answered. You would ruin you. I'm just done assisting. Older adults know the difference. It's the line between consequence and revenge. She looked at the floor, then the ring light catching on her bracelet, then me. So this is it? I shook my head. This is the first honest moment we've had in a year. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came. For the first time since she'd rewritten our story, the pen slipped. For her. I gathered plates the way I'd done 1,000 nights, not as a servant, as a man who prefers clean counters before clean exits. At the sink, water ran hot and steady, a sound I could stand inside. I turned back to them and spoke the sentence I'd carried for weeks. Silence isn't weakness, I said. It's strategy. Not a threat. A fact. I was quiet while I learned. I'm finished learning. I slid the USB back into my pocket and wiped a stray drop from the table. Richard pushed his chair in, careful now. Jessica stared at the candle like it had betrayed her as well. Older adults know this posture. It's what happens when the performance ends and the lights stay up. I walked to the doorway, paused, and let the house breathe once. Dinner's over, I said. So is the story where I pay for my replacement. The room stayed still. Tomorrow would not. For any man. Tonight, I chose freedom. Not the loud kind, the lasting kind. The kind you earn by refusing to fund your own erasure. I took back my power with the same patience they mocked, the same quiet they mistook for weakness. The folder closes. The house exhales. I will sleep with the window cracked and the door locked, not against the world, but for what remains of me. Tomorrow I'll call the people who matter, set the terms, and keep my name clean. No victory lap, no revenge parade, just a man returning the keys to himself. If you're 30, 50, 65, you know this truth. Some endings are mercy. Some boundaries are love pointed inward. I'm done apologizing for keeping what I built. The story turns here. Now I want to hear from you. If it were you, would you forgive or end it? Comment A, forgive, or B, end it. And tell me why. Your words might be the hand someone needs. Subscribe for the next chapter of courage.